Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories.
Fully in line with international law, in self-defence and in response to a persistent threat.
Britain's Prime Minister justifies the latest airstrikes by the UK and the US against Houthi positions in Yemen. Our other headlines: the Israeli army suffers its deadliest day since the Gaza conflict began, but Prime Minister Netanyahu vows to fight on until absolute victory. At least 3 people dead and tens of thousands evacuated as a powerful earthquake strikes a remote part of China's Xinjiang. And the death toll from the landslide in southwest China climbs above 30 as rescuers continue to search for survivors. The United States and the UK have conducted a new wave of attacks on Houthi positions in Yemen. The two countries say they hit 8 targets, destroying weapon sites and drone systems. This is the second time in 2 weeks that the two countries have launched airstrikes in Yemen aimed at preventing the Iran-backed rebel group from targeting shipping in the Red Sea. Some in Yemen have expressed their anger over the strikes.
We will not be afraid of the American Zionist airstrikes. We're only afraid of God. We're steadfast for generations to come.
These strikes do not scare us and will not turn a hair on our heads. We are steadfast and support Palestine from within our hearts.
The U.S. airstrikes are like a spray of water for a thirsty person. I swear it will not scare us.
A member of the Houthi political bureau says these airstrikes will not pass without a response.
This is barbaric aggression, but it will not last long. America will be defeated in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Arabian Sea, and we will discipline it soon. Through the American-British aggression against Yemen, it became clear that there was a catastrophic failure in the American intelligence operations.
Britain's Foreign Secretary David Cameron has defended the action and warned of further strikes.
These attacks are illegal, they're unacceptable, and what we've done, again, is send the clearest possible message that we will continue to degrade their ability to carry out these attacks, whilst sending the clearest possible message that we back our words and our warnings with action. And let's be absolutely clear, we have no quarrel with the Yemeni people. Indeed, our aid feeds over 100,000 Yemenis every month, using the sea lane, delivering that aid, which is precisely the sea lane that the Houthis are trying to close.
Israel's Prime Minister has vowed to continue fighting in Gaza until absolute victory after the country's military suffered its deadliest day since this conflict began. 24 soldiers were killed on Monday, most of them in an explosion in Gaza. The Israeli government described the deaths as unbearably difficult, but says this conflict will determine the future of Israel for decades. Our correspondent Sarah Coates is in Tel Aviv. Sarah, the Israeli government warning troops will not back down in Gaza. What more do we know about how these soldiers died?
Hello there, Jamie. Well, look, according to the Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari, troops were operating near Khan Yunis as part of the army's efforts to create what it's calling a buffer zone to allow these border communities to return home. Now, he says that an RPG was fired at a tank, which then triggered another explosion, likely the result of mines that were planted there by troops. This then saw 2 buildings come down on these Israeli military forces. And there was then a very complex rescue operation to try and get these people out. Now, we have heard from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He's offered his condolences to the families of these 24 soldiers killed. We do need to stress that 21 of these were killed in that incident there that I just described, with a number of funerals held in Jerusalem today, as the IDF says it's launched a probe into the incident.
Our hearts are broken. We're all one huge family who is trying to survive the pain and concentrate on cherishing life. We need everybody back home alive and do everything we can to bring everybody back home.
And Jamie, the military now says it's completed its encirclement of Khan Yunis. That's, of course, that southern Gazan city. It says it's killed a number of Hamas operatives over the past 24 hours in what is being described as the fiercest fighting yet.
And Hezbollah claims to have hit an Israeli airbase. Just bring us up to date on the fighting along the border with Lebanon.
Well, Jamie, the IDF has just in the last hour confirmed that attack. It says that there's been slight damage caused to this Meron facility. It says that the military claims that there were no injuries, adding the incident is under investigation. But look, this is significant given it is the only surveillance area, the only airbase there in the north, and it is extremely sensitive. And given this attack just happened in broad daylight, it really goes to show the capabilities here that Hezbollah has. And we do need to mention it is the second such attack in a number of weeks. Now, Hezbollah says that this is in response to these recent assassinations in both Lebanon and also Syria. So it certainly is a major escalation on that northern border, and fears are really mounting, Jamie, of a wider war on that northern border there with Lebanon. We did hear from the Defence Minister just last week. He told his US counterpart Lloyd Austin that Israel is nearing a decision point on Lebanon. And look, throughout the day, rocket sirens have been ringing out on that northern border as Israel continues to strike inside southern Lebanon.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Well, Gaza's health ministry says at least 200 Palestinians have now been killed in Israeli strikes in the last 24 hours. Our correspondent Noor Harazin is in the city of Rafah. Noor, with Israeli soldiers increasing attacks on Khan Yunis, Palestinian families are being forced to flee once again. Just tell us about these latest strikes.
Well, yes, today the Israeli forces intensified their attacks on Khan Yunis, specifically talking about eastern Khan Yunis and also central Khan Yunis around the Al-Nasser hospital. Journalists inside the Al-Nasser hospital, which is now housing hundreds of thousands of people, patients, displaced people, journalists, medical staff, is now being under direct fire from the Israeli forces. Several journalists, including Hamdan al-Dahdouh, published on social media videos of from the Al-Nasser hospital, from inside the Al-Nasser hospital, showing the Israeli snipers shooting at the buildings of the hospital. The Palestinian Health Ministry said earlier this morning in a statement that more than 200 people were killed. Most of them were actually killed in the city of Khan Yunis due to the very intense Israeli strikes on the Khan Yunis city overnight. Shortly after that, Palestinian medical sources said that they are still finding more bodies in the streets. They reported that 12 more bodies were found in the streets of Khan Yunis, adding the fact that there is dozens of bodies still in the streets or under the destroyed building. They are talking actually about dozens of people that were killed, and still they are not included in the daily numbers because they did not manage to evacuate their bodies.
And aid groups have once again sounded the alarm over the risk of famine across the enclave.
Well, yes, I mean, the humanitarian situation here is catastrophic. It is unbearable to live here in Gaza. Talking about northern Gaza, and specifically northern Gaza, because this area, northern Gaza, Jabalia refugee camp, Beit Hanun, central Gaza city, this area have been isolated for more than 2.5 months than the rest of the Gaza Strip, and very, very little aid is actually entering to the northern Gaza Strip. So we are getting reports reports that there are people dying from thirst and hunger in northern Gaza. They reached the point where they are grinding the animal feed just to feed themselves, to make some bread, to eat anything that is available. Talking about middle Gaza also, there is a very slow distribution of aid because it is very hard and unsafe for the teams, the humanitarian aid teams, to move around and distribute aid on middle Gaza. Here in Rafah, even though there is some aid being distributed on the families, but then this aid is being sold in the markets at 10th the normal price. So yes, the situation, the humanitarian situation in every area in Gaza, from its north to its south, is deteriorating, adding the fact that now it is winter. A new storm would hit Gaza in the next 2 days. People, most of the displaced people, are actually residing in plastic and wooden tents that would not even protect them from the cold and the rain.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Rafah. Rare protests have been held in Russia over the war in Ukraine, with a growing number of Russian women calling for soldiers to return from the front line. Their husbands are among the 300,000 reservists mobilized by President Putin nearly a year and a half ago. The women gather each week at Moscow's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, risking arrest for their actions. A woman has been killed and 2 family members injured after their car hit a hay bale roadblock set up by farmers protesting in France. 3 people have been arrested. Farmers have been demonstrating across the country, calling on the government to cut taxes and ensure better prices for produce. Voters in the U.S. state of New Hampshire are heading to the polls for the first presidential primary of the year. Former President Trump is facing his last remaining Republican opponent, Nikki Haley, after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis dropped out. The eventual Republican nominee will challenge the Democrat nominee, likely President Joe Biden, in November's election. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the frantic search continues in a remote part of China after 31 people were killed in a landslide.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Fresh US and UK airstrikes against the Houthis spark condemnation in Yemen. Britain's Prime Minister calls it self-defense. Our other headlines: the Israeli army suffers its deadliest day since the Gaza conflict began, but Prime Minister Netanyahu vows to fight on until absolute victory. At least 31 people are now known to have been killed by Monday's landslide in China. 13 others remain missing. Over 1,000 rescuers are racing to find the survivors near the city of Jiaotong. Hundreds of people have been moved to temporary accommodation, while power and transport links have reportedly been restored. Our correspondent Yang Jinghao reports.
A cold wave is sweeping across the whole Yunnan province. And over the past three days, this small village has been snowing, and the temperature here right now is just -3 degrees Celsius, so it's freezingly cold here, and everywhere is frozen, so you can imagine how hot it is to carry out such massive rescue work here. And I talked to some of the rescuers. They said that everywhere and on the side is slippery, further complicating their rescue work. And the low temperatures have inevitably complicated the rescue efforts. On one hand, the trapped villagers easily suffer from the so-called hypothermia. And on the other hand, this has also added more difficulties to the rescuers because, as I just mentioned, it's really freezingly cold here. But this is just one challenge. As the landslide has destabilized the whole mountain, increasing the risk of secondary disasters. So the rescuers have to be very cautious about the possible dangers. And starting yesterday, some other facilities like the so-called slope stability radars have been put into use to monitor the possible follow-up natural disasters.
And at least 3 people have been killed and several injured by a powerful 7.1 magnitude earthquake in China's Xinjiang region. It was centered on a remote village on the border with Kazakhstan. Dozens of homes have collapsed and temporary shelters have been set up. Emergency teams are in the area and power supplies are being restored. Xinjiang is currently suffering a cold snap with daytime temperatures of -10 degrees Celsius. Europe's ambitions in space are centre stage at this year's space conference in Brussels. Let's talk to our correspondent Stuart Smith, who's watching events for us. Stuart, what can we expect from this conference?
Well, looking up into what the European Union is going to be doing outside Earth, it's looking at 2 main themes we heard from earlier, trying to develop an autonomous capability so the EU can go to space without having to require the help of other nations, and also trying to create autonomous re-entry vehicles, so vehicles which the European Union has amongst the European Space Agency that can go to space and come back again. There are a host of projects, far more than I can summarise just now, but Josef Aschbacher, the Director General of the European Space Agency, explained earlier to those assembled here the kinds of things he's most excited about.
The moon will become a future economic zone. There will be a lot happening. There are many projects going on. There's about 100 missions right now going to the moon. Also ESA, we have several missions going to the moon. Argonaut is one of the biggest ones, where we would like to bring 1.5 tons of mass to the moon for experiments, for building up a station, for transporting cargo to the moon surface. There's also, of course, water, which is on the south pole of the moon. And this is a very precious resource. You can convert it into oxygen, into fuel. So there's a lot happening. There are resources on the moon surface, and all this needs yet to be explored.
As one delegate put it, though, there's plenty more that is going on in space that's trying to help people here on the ground. For example, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Space, which delegates say is useful for achieving 15 of those, from monitoring methane and CO2 emissions, monitoring agricultural productivity. There even is the capability with some of the EU satellites to monitor for illegal fishing. It provides a lens on the world which otherwise EU lawmakers would not have, and therefore is useful for achieving those sustainable development goals. What they're looking to improve upon is getting more hardware into space and getting it to space faster, and one of the ways they're looking at doing that is with international collaboration. For example, the meteorologists here today saying how useful it is to be able to join with partners around the world, from the US, from Asia, to create a comprehensive global picture of the world's weather, which provides benefits here in the EU for all citizens, with the dangers, especially with increasing hazards when it comes to natural disasters.
Stuart, thank you for that. Our correspondent Stuart Smith in Brussels. Now, last year saw more records when it came to United States migration. More than 2.5 million people tried to cross the border from Mexico in the year to September, and some places saw higher numbers of people trying to cross. Our correspondent Alistair Baverstock reports.
Eagle Pass on the US border with Mexico, a Texas town in the eye of a migrant crisis storm. After wading across the Rio Grande, migrants are met by US law enforcement for processing.
Thousands of migrants have been crossing the US-Mexico border along this stretch of the Rio Grande on a daily basis, stretching local law enforcement and migration authorities to their limit.
Tom Schmerber has been the local sheriff for 12 years and was a Border Patrol agent for 26 years before that. He says 2023's migrant situation has been extraordinary.
Never have I seen something like this in this area. I'm talking of more than 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people crossing. They're just walking and they're not running. They want to be apprehended. It's going to be more than 10, maybe 15,000 people coming in within a week. Unbelievable.
It's a situation that led the local government in Eagle Pass to declare a state of emergency, allowing the city to request additional federal funds to handle the crisis. For the Sheriff's Department, it's a matter of national security.
We need the help from the federal government. It's overwhelmed. The police department, they have like 70 officers. We have much, much, much less than that. Yeah, and the criminal element takes advantage of that. They know we're going to be tied up. And then at the same time, they're crossing drugs and all that to the other sides.
However, once processed and admitted into the US, the migrants don't remain here. Giuseppe Garcia from Caracas, Venezuela, is bound for Miami, where he'll have a court date to argue his case for asylum. He hopes this will be the final leg of a 4-month journey.
2 meses y medio en México.
I spent 2.5 months in Mexico, and the situation there is devastating. I couldn't wait on an appointment at the border any longer. Crossing the river is the only option.
No hay otra forma.
But while these migrants have reached the United States, some don't survive the arduous journey. Indeed, the border itself has become one of the major dangers they face on their quest to reach America. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Eagle Pass, Texas.
Now, the best wines are the ones we drink with friends, apparently. But one French winemaker took that literally when she travelled to China and fell in love with the people and the produce. CGTN's correspondent Dai Kai looks at how one woman is sharing Chinese-produced wines with the world.
I come from France. I was born in Burgundy, which is a very famous wine region. My focus when I was younger was to study Chinese language, Chinese history, civilization, language. I've been in China for almost 13 years, working in the wine industry. Now I'm a worldwide brand ambassador and international affairs director for Siguo Estate.
For Christelle Chenet, coming to Ningxia represents more than just another job. Is a brand new opportunity for China's wine industry.
I believe we had the capacity to do something very meaningful for the Chinese wine industry. So I say, okay. I've seen a lot of changes in the wine industry from 13 years ago when I just arrived in China working in the wine industry. It was a fast developing wine market in China. You have a lot of great winemakers in China now. You have a lot of great people working in the vineyard. What the wine industry needs the most at that time is people with experience in sales, in marketing, to know how to promote and to build the brand. That's one of my strengths. So hopefully I can bring something to the table. But I think maybe one of the reasons that I feel at home in China is because there is a lot of similarities in Chinese culture and French culture. And I think on the most important part of a human being life, that is food, wine, friends, family. I think that's the basis of everybody's life. I have found my family. I have friends that I've known for over 10 years in China, and they are still in my life. We are still in touch. And a lot of my friends, of course, like me, love wine. So I just feel at home. And I have no plan of leaving China anytime soon. I'm going to be there forever.
Winter sports are booming in China, but ski instructors are in short supply. Now those hoping to teach the skills of the slopes are heading to the European Alps. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger met one teenager aiming to become the first Chinese skier to pass Austria's highest instructor exam.
Hong Kong-born Andy Cheng teaches beginners at Austria's Kitzsteinhorn Resort.
Make sure the pressure is on the downhill like us. We ski.
The 17-year-old moved here to improve his ski instructing. He's already reached level 2 and is now trying to be the first Chinese instructor to pass Austria's federal exam.
I would like to try to reach the highest level in the Stahlhelfer exam in Austria, which requires 100 days, and then it will get me very well prepared to organize and to improve the ski industry in China.
Austria's federal ski instructor exam is considered one of the toughest in the world. It takes up to 5 years of preparation and not only requires excellent skiing skills, but also in-depth knowledge of equipment, snow conditions, avalanche risks and first aid.
Hi, Andy. Hello. Let's go.
A few years ago, ski school operator Bernhard Ratschiller noticed Andy's potential at a skiing simulator in Shanghai. He suggested Andy could improve his skills in Austria, but he also wanted to make Austria's skiing knowledge more widely accessible for those unable to relocate, and so he started creating a ski school app.
You don't have to grow up at the mountains to become then a good skier. It doesn't matter if you grow up like Andy in Shanghai, in a big city. If you have that dream and that motivation as a kid, that you can achieve that as well. Let's have a quick look at your performance at the turn. The hip is on the inside and the ski goes a little bit away from your platform. Yeah. You go online, you go on the platform, you pick your coach, and you will immediately have the access to the trainers of the trainers in Austria, and they will give you feedback on your videos and will coach you through the season if you want so.
Bernhard has now successfully trained 500 Chinese ski instructors. The new app will allow him to reach even more people in China and across the world. Johannes Pleshberger, CGTN, Kitzsteinhorn, Austria.
The headlines again. Fresh US and UK airstrikes against the Houthis spark condemnation in Yemen. Britain's Prime Minister calls it self-defense. Our other headlines: the Israeli army suffers its deadliest day since the Gaza conflict began, but Prime Minister Netanyahu vows to fight on until absolute victory. And the death toll from the landslide in southwest China climbs above 30 people as rescuers continue to search for survivors. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.